Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on the lore, the narrative, and the big ideas of the galaxy far, far away and of our own. It must be said, my name is Matthew. I'm coming to you from Underworld North Studio in Toronto, and as always, I'm joined from across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how's Underworld Orange County doing?
It's doing good. I don't have myself a Blood Light beer, unfortunately. It would have been good with the theme. But
Uh,
I am doing good. It's pretty warm, but it's going to start getting a little rainy,
yeah, so
unfortunately. So, ick for me.
yeah. That's right. It's starting to thaw, I think. Maybe not quite yet up here, but no. In with the theme, good leadership by not letting you drink a Bud Light. Friends
I don't
don't
have
let
Bud Light.
friends,
I got water. I got good
friends don't
old.
let friends drink Bud Light. That's all
Heck,
I'll say about that. Star Wars does have a lot to say about leadership. The Saga films often involve leaders as supporting characters who spur on our younger heroes to come into their own and take leadership roles themselves. For example, General Organa's biting words to Poe, dead heroes, no leaders. Pushed him to guide the resistance out of Crait and take on the mantle of fighting the First Order and the Final Order. Then at other times, those older figures can be obstacles for the main characters to overcome, either by their presence, hello Palpatine, or their absence, good night Qui-Gon, noble end. Uh, when those heroes themselves then get taken up as legacy characters in the wider canon, we often see them in a leadership role, especially Luke, Leia, and Han, ultimately Rey and Finn. And, and then, of course, we have the great example as if her character reaches beyond the story into the realm of storytelling itself. Mon Mothma can shepherd the transition from prequel trilogy to the originals as she leads the emerging Rebel Alliance. So this week, we are examining these stories in and more for lessons on the do's and don'ts, the who and who's not of leadership. More on that in just a bit.
winners, losers.
Yes. There we go. Uh, First off, forget the plugs out of the way. You can follow us on Blue Sky at ioncannon.bisky.social. It's at ioncannon. For Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, other Blue Sky, etc. Check out at the SWU. Joel, I know you got a lot of good stuff going on there as well. If you prefer to listen to your podcast here in the audio only format, we are on Spotify and Apple. Just search Ion Cannon Podcast in the podcatcher of your choice. And I will throw this episode up once we're done recording tonight. Of course, we are proudly part of the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network. And here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we got YouTube memberships, we got super chats. If you comment in the boxes down below, we'll get to it when we can, when it fits with the flow of the conversation. If you super chat us, we'll get to it immediately. We'll interrupt ourselves. There we go. We're grateful for any support. We're grateful for any kind of engagement. We'll always enjoy that, but grateful for any support you're willing to provide to the channel and to the network. And of course, speaking about the network, we got our Underworld Network Discord server down in the description below. You can get a link to get in, and we're talking about the certain teaser that came out and marketing strategies and things like that we'll get into tonight, of course. But check that out in the description below. And Joel, anything going on recently? Anything coming up in the Discord server?
Well, we are actually going to continue our Mandoverse rewatch with episode 7 of 8 of Mandalorian Season 1. So
Nice.
join us for that. And next week, we're probably going to do a game night. So be on the lookout for that as well. We're also gearing up for a D&D session. I'm not sure when. You can ask our friend Darth Peanut, one of the mods, to if he wants to join or not, if you need players. Or you want to host D&D yourself. So yeah, check us out there on Star Wars Underworld Discord.
There we go. Again, the link in the description down below. Last but certainly not least, check out the tractor beam. Guess what, guys? There's a Star Wars comic book coming out this week, coming out this Wednesday. It's the Jar Jar one shot. So long awaited one shot written by Mark Guggenheim and Ahmed Best, featuring both Jar Jar and Keller and Beck. It's gonna be a fun, exciting ride. So Chris Abbott and I are going to talk about that right here on the Underworld YouTube channel and Facebook and Twitch or wherever you get your podcasts. So that is this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And also check out the Tractor Beam Star Wars Comics reviews on Spotify and Apple, and the Tractor Beam on Blue Sky. Misa like it. Oh, all right. Speaking of moving right along. We got our week in Star Wars. Joel, I'll let you take it away.
This kind of has a little bit to do with the teaser, but on kind of just a grandier scale of people talking about like, oh, this is the grand return of Star Wars to the theaters and all that stuff. And I'll be honest, the narrative around Star Wars has gone away and then came back with like first with the originals and the prequels and then the prequels to the sequels. I've never liked for a few reasons. Look, if all you care about is like the sanctity of live action Star Wars films, I mean, I guess I can understand that to a great extent, of course. But Star Wars never went away. Star Wars didn't go away. It's not like Star Wars just stopped after 1983, 83 or 82 with Return of the Jedi. I always forget when. I know it's the early 80s. I always think Star Wars goes into the late 80s when Star Wars is more of a 70s thing. But there was droids. There was the Ewok cartoon. There was the Ewok movies. And I've talked to some people who lived in the 80s. Those were big back in the day. I know it's kind of like they're forgotten now, but those were big deals back in the day. And then you have all the 90s with the books and the comics. It's not like Star Wars just stopped. And video games, lots of old-timey video games like X-Wing, TIE Fighter, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, Dark Forces, Dark Forces 2. Lots of old-timey games. The Terrace Kotze video game that nobody likes, but it was probably big in arcade.
Jedi Power Battles?
Yeah, Jedi Power Battles. There we go.
Yeah.
And then obviously you got the 90s glory of the early 2000s glory of the prequels and stuff. And it's like after that, it's like 2005 to 2008 is that to Clone Wars. That's only like 3 years for the next big Star Wars thing. And even then, in between, there was still lots of breaks and games. KOTOR was still going strong. Then you have 2008 to 2012, which with Clone Wars, and of course there were video games still, and Force Unleashed, and the Tor MMORPG. So there was always Star Wars around, and then of course you get the reboot. And even before Force Awakens, it's like you got Rebels, you have books and comics. And then you know what? After kind of the initial run of movies, the first go around, we've had 7 years of big blockbuster streaming shows that could be movies in themselves. In a lot of ways, they're not always treated as such because they're not movies. But they're big. One is Mandalorian was kind of a global phenomenon for a little bit. And you get big things like Andor and Ahsoka, and then even mid things like Skeleton Crew, which were fun, and Acolyte and all that stuff. So which are big budget live action Star Wars, and let's face it, a lot of people still follow the live action stuff regardless. They shouldn't, but they do. And of course, then you got the animated stuff still going on with Bad Batch and Visions, and of course all the books and comics that always are happening. Books and comics are still always going to happen, and now we have movies again. I mean, well. Now you're not massive comics, but you still get some bump in a year, hopefully. So, and then now we're getting movies again. So my point is, I'm kind of sick of people acting as if like Star Wars was there, the original trilogy, and they went away. And they came back with the prequels, and they went away. Like, no, it's never gone away. It just kept going. It's never stopped, unless you're just not paying attention. Which I mean, fair enough, I guess. But I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, that's just factually not true. It is objectively you're wrong, and it's just something that's like it's a dumb narrative, and that's my rant of the day.
There was a meme going around, I think after Pope Benedict was elected, of Cardinal Ratzinger drinking a beer, and Ratzinger's drinking a beer. Your argument is invalid. No, but I'll be the first to say, of course. First to be like, oh yeah, of course, there's always been these stories. And last year, Tractor Beam especially, I'd be like, hey, there's a new Star Wars story coming out every Wednesday. Of course, that's no longer the case, but will be again one day, maybe, to your point. But on the other hand, I think you agree on. You can see both sides to this, Joel. That it speaks to the way that Star Wars in the public consciousness, the zeitgeist, is a film franchise. I used to think It's a streaming franchise, and you and I, I mean, again, I'm the first person to say those novels are some of the best Star Wars stories out there, and are as good as films and as good as streaming shows, sometimes better. But they just don't get the attention because they're novels, right? Who reads novels in 2026? But I do. I'm reading a Star Wars novel right now. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the sense of where did it go? It does take a lot less effort to publish a novel, or a lot less money to publish a novel, a lot less profile. It doesn't take less effort to write a novel than it is to write a script for a film, but it's where our cultural context is. We're no longer, take the intellectual view, we're no longer a literary culture. We're no longer a bookish culture. We're a digital culture, right? You and I are on YouTube as opposed to, we're not writing magazines to print and give our thoughts there. But to your point, I mean, there's always, I see both sides. There's always stories coming out. I hope there are always comics. I hope that changes. The next 2 weeks have comics, which is great. But
I will argue, though, I still will not agree that people who are comparing this gap of movies to the last two it's not like to like.
No, because there was the streaming shows.
Live action streaming service.
Yeah, live action.
That's the big. That's the big one.
Yeah.
Not to put down animation personally, but you know how people are.
Well, yeah. Again, that's the point. Yeah, it's true. Live action in an era where we thought live action streaming was going to take over from films, and that turned out not to be the case for both economic reasons and experiential reasons. But yeah, see you in there. Buenas noches from Canada. Welcome, Alexander. Glad for you to join us. All right, I have a much more serious one, oddly enough. One of the things we do here, two of the things we do here at the Eye on Canon podcast, is we talk about the Trump administration quite a bit. And another thing we like to do is to make sure our progressive, kind of left-leaning, I mean, I'm a leftist in Canada, for crying out loud, space isn't an echo chamber. And so, this is sort of tangential to Star Wars. But I'm going to start with Star Wars, and then I'll get into my main point here. You think about the rise of Palpatine, and the story we get is the story that Beaumont Kin tells us, for example, is that Palpatine was able to toughen or batter and bruise the galaxy through the Clone Wars to the point where they said, oh, he's going to actually come and bring us peace and order. We want this stability of the Empire. And, somewhat in a way he does it. He doesn't really, but for some people he does. So the story we often are told later in the Empire is of the oligarchs who are brazenly supporting what he's doing because it makes them rich. It keeps lining their pockets and keeps them safe, right? If they go along with it, they don't necessarily have a target on their back unless it's Operation Cinder. That's a whole other story. What about the ordinary folks who genuinely believe that the Jedi were a menace at best and truly enemies to peace at worst, as the generals of the Clone Wars? What about the folks who continued to support the Empire because their kind of minds were so jarred by the Clone Wars and the memory of the Clone Wars and the specter of the Clone Wars coming back, specter of Outer Rim neglect coming back? And that's the thing with, say, even the New Republic isn't really able to police the Outer Rim or resource the Outer Rim maybe the way a lot of people had this American dream, if you will, of the Empire being able to do that, being able to bring prosperity to these outlying areas that the Republic had neglected. and also, right, the sense that here along comes this wonderful uncle figure, Uncle Palpy, who's going to keep you safe. Look at that problem over there with those domestic terrorists or those rabble rousers, the basically separatists. They're going to keep you safe. I'm going to keep you safe. And how many of them continued to support the Empire because they weren't capable of knowing anything else, of considering the line, the line that the rebels were trying to get people to see was that actually the Empire is this tyrannical authoritarian dictatorship, right?
Mhm.
Authoritarian regime that was causing mass exploitation and violence and death, and only to serve one man's quest for immortality, um, among other things that the rebellion was right about mentioning. So this is where I come to this is, I see on Instagram a lot, including, after the fact that ICE is killed 8 people now, how many thousands are in detention, the Obama thing on Truth Social the other day, all that, even before this, like months ago, I'd see on Instagram folks like, no good people support this. No good people support this. And I see what you mean. No good people would support if they were capable of seeing that this is what this administration is doing. This is what this one guy who is reacting, this guy with orange hair, white hair now, or whatever, is just reacting to, the Bad Bunny concert because he's Hispanic and is clearly against him. My point is, I don't think that the whole no good people support him and support this is, I think it's a little too simplistic, because what you're really seeing is this mass delusion at play. It is I honestly think whole dissertations are going to be written on the power of cognitive dissonance to render whole swaths of folks, and not everyone, like, buyer's remorse is huge. They know the midterms are going to be toast. If the midterms are free and fair, they're toast. But there's still a good chunk of folks who of ordinary, everyday working folks who still tuned into the TPUSA thing last night if they could, who will still vote for him, not because they think that what ICE is actually doing is okay, not because they think that would be okay, not because they think that what Trump has posted on Truth Social would be okay, but because they're psychologically not capable of believing it. They're not capable of accepting even the possibility that these things are going on. Because to question, this is what cognitive dissonance would do, is to question that Trump, that this is what the administration is the ICE raids. It is, speaking of Venezuela, it's, I don't know. I know there's mixed feelings about Maduro. I get that, but threatening doing it through this militaristic violation of sovereignty, everything with Greenland, all that, but especially ICE. That's going to be my main memory of the Trump administration. That very thought, very possibility threatens their sense of safety and sense of well-being. And I see it all over. Like, I know people, where that's the case, right? Where clearly the Obama thing was a staffer. Clearly Trump didn't accept that. Clearly those who have been detained by ICE, they're violent criminals. clearly, right? All these things that mitigate in their mind the reality of it, because it they base their sense of safety on Trump is going to keep us safe. And I'm thinking about this even more. It goes deeper than this. It goes to Trump is keeping us safe by pointing out the things that this is this added layer, and it's more complex even. Trump is keeping us safe, making us feel safe by continuing this narrative that we're in danger, right? He's the one pointing out, oh, these people from other countries, oh, whatnot, because the thing that's actually keeping people feeling safe is the continued narrative of being endangered by immigrants. It's this wild paradox, but it's this how this mass delusion, and it's not. I don't think it's fair to say that they're good people or bad people. That they're bad people. Just it's only fair to say they're people, and we all have our narratives of safety and security that we hold on to. Hopefully, ideally, we can engage reality with nuance and with mutual respect. The last thing I'll say is, look, Trump, I mean, Joel, you say this all the time. Trump isn't clever enough to engineer this like Palpatine was, right?
What he so much more pathetic. It's like, oh great, we got the stupid version.
But what I'll say is, the reason Trump makes people feel safe by making them feel scared is because he's scared himself, right? He is pointing, I mean, the brilliant
an old
film
boomer who dying.
Yeah, well, the brilliant film by with Sebastian Stan, The Apprentice. He's being shows just how much he's being ingrained with these ideologies, and I mean, So he's just saying you're saying the quiet part out loud, but the no good people still support this. Look, I've read my Bible. Bible says, no, why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. And I know you don't have to believe in God to believe that that necessarily, but the point being, we're all fragile, we're all frail. And one of the interesting, one of the almost hopeful silver linings is that this is a time in which our fragility or frailty is coming to the fore, that maybe we can finally actually reckon with it. So, and maybe bring back to Star Wars, Star Wars, especially the prequels, they're this mirror that helps us reflect on these things. Who was saying, think of how art, especially fiction, or no, it's in Wonder Man.
I didn't watch Wonder Man, so
it's so good. You should watch it. And in it, one of the characters is, acting and art holds up a mirror to the human condition, and that's what George was doing, especially in this prequel trilogy. And so, to get us to reflect on those things. So,
well, weirdly, I would argue that the sequel era actually does this better than the prequel, because that's the whole story.
That's
it's sort of that question of, what are we going to do with this 10, 20, 30 fluctuates of people who are still diehard loyalists to the previous regime, right? That's sort of the question the Republic got to answer, right? That's the question we got to answer. I know some people would prefer.
That's not helpful.
That's one way to deal. I know some people like, if you vote for Trump, then
that'll make things worse.
What do you do? And especially if they're still diehards anyway. It's like that's kind of the thing about the First Order. It's like they're that last 10, 20. We're gonna make up numbers. I'm making up numbers. Percent of the galaxy that armed up to the teeth. They're not big. They didn't really win in a fair fight. They just blew up the Capitol and caused the New Republic to go. We don't have leadership. We're kind of disorganized right now. But they're certainly, they're certainly not small enough. They were certainly small. And kind of like, well, what do you do with that? It's this
Yeah.
dangerous that's not going away. What do you do?
Mm.
What do you?
Yeah.
And it doesn't help in our two-party system where it's like you kind of
No.
have to vote for one or the other. And let's face it, with gerrymandering, and like even if they're gonna win, which I think they can, you still got gerrymandering. And what the Republicans still get, I don't know, 30% of the vote and seats in Congress anyway, and
Yeah.
also all the southern states that are still very red anyway, that are just genuinely red.
Yeah.
Can't do anything about that. So what do you do? I don't know. What do you do with that 10, 20, 30, again, making up numbers, percent of
Sure.
people who aren't changing? And that's something everybody's got to deal with. That's always like a big question, like leadership in terms of like post-revolutionary
Yeah.
states. What do you do with that corpse that doesn't like you and wants to see you dead?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, what do you do politically? Right. I mean, there is such thing as hate speech. There's such thing as convictions for hate speech, I should say. There's such thing as, I know you don't like this parallel, but are we going to have some equivalent to the Nuremberg trials, or some sort of not maybe that extreme, but
That'd be awesome.
But
That'd be awesome.
The fact that
Bush,
there are criminal proceedings that do need to go on. But here's the thing: all I know is, what do you do at the Thanksgiving table, the Christmas table, and that's I think where the rubber is going to meet the road for a lot of folks, especially in 3 years. When Trump is out of office, if he's out of office, and when President whoever, Buttigieg or Ossoff or AOC or whoever, and people are terrified, what do you do? What do you do then? I'll say it's a different Star franchise, but I'll say I keep this model of the Titan A on my desk here because it's a reminder. So this was New York Comic Con 2024. It was October, so American Thanksgiving was coming up, and I was in panel with Todd Stashwick, or like watching Todd Stashwick's panel, and his character in Picard is someone who is a survivor of the Borg attack on the Federation, and survivor of this horrific attack on his political entity, right? And he was part of that battle, and on comes his ship, 7 as his first officer, who's a Borg, right? And he really, really struggles with it and really has to work through what do I do? How do I don't want to acknowledge this person as she claims herself to be. There's definitely like a trans narrative in there, right? So he dead names her in different things, right? And so I asked Todd Stashwick about this because of course he is very compassionate and understanding and affirming and progressive. He's a Hollywood guy, Anyway,
because you're Hollywood doesn't make you progressive.
That's true, but he's in Star Trek. Anyway, I know he is, and it comes through in the role, I should say. That comes through in the role in his journey towards processing his own, we overuse this word trauma, and his own fear. And it's funny that said whoever asks the best question will get this ship, and you can see it. And the question I asked was, okay, well, American Thanksgiving's coming up. We're gonna have folks at the dinner table because this is just before the election, right? And the election's coming up. What do we do? What do we say? And his answer was empathy, was listen with compassion. If it's safe for you, if that's how I understand privilege, is to say, if it's safe for you, or at least privilege being a benefit, if it's safe for you to listen to someone express their fears, we get into these debating matches trying to think there's a rational argument, and there isn't. There's only, I can see you're afraid. I can see that you're afraid.
I'm
I'm
gonna be
here.
honest though, Matthew.
Yeah.
I'm not as hopeful because I'm seeing on the liberal side, on the Dem side,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't want that. They want, if you vote for Trump, you're dead.
Right.
In
And I'm
both a
saying,
metaphor and an actual sense, and then you're dead to me.
and
Then, like,
that's and part of that is fear of the other side. Part of that
and arrest
is,
Trump and well, to be fair, I wouldn't mind that too. But arrest Trump and Miller and put them. Well, to be fair, maybe they should probably.
well, again, there's justice, there's criminal justice, but I'm talking about everyone else who doesn't have the launch codes, who exercised their right to vote and voted out of fear. And that's what I mean. And so to all those Democrats, all those progressives who are like, you're dead to me. Now, if that's because it's not safe for you to engage in that conversation, then don't engage in that conversation. But if it is safe for you, then you can, it's a very important skill to learn to listen without agreeing, and listen with compassion without agreeing. And we need to cultivate that skill, because that's, I mean, one, I know it's a very small little example, but it's how we're gonna, I think, how we're gonna move towards healing society. It's the little bit we can do towards the healing of society. And again, I don't know if that's going to make much of a difference or not, but I think it's all we got. So yeah, and also bots on Twitch.
Oh,
so yeah, that's my thought.
We love bots on Twitch.
Cool it with the no good people. Still support this thing. I mean, Instagram stories are always going to be hyper simplistic, and it's social media, but remember Captain Shaw goes from nope to yes. Yeah. Or we can Star Trek. There we go. Yeah. Any further thoughts? Or
nah, we can talk more about this when we get into the actual leadership topic, I think.
Yeah, that's right. We'll get there. So from the sublime to the intentionally ridiculous, let's make this awkward segue. Attack of the Tauntauns. Dun, 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 dun. Sam Elliott narrating this wild and crazy beer teaser trailer for the Mandalorian Grogu, whatever on earth it was. Joel, you have a bunch of thoughts on it. Well, first I'll say I thought it was hilarious. I'm like, that's it. That's all it was. We got trolled, guys. Star Wars.
And they never said a trailer was coming. That was deadline. Disney never promised you anything, so that's on you.
Exactly. We got trolled, and I'm here for it. I thought it was hilarious. Just how bad the Tauntauns look. How it says nothing about the story. Yeah. Interesting moment. I think it's hilarious. Wonder how it'll play with the wider audience. Maybe they'll be like, I mean, Dom and I were talking about it right after. And he was like, "Oh, there's a Star Wars coming out. Let's go see the Star Wars." And then all of us Star Wars fans are like, "What is this? This is terrible. What's going on?" They're tooling with us. It's a joke about. Make a joke about your. I believe he's making a joke about your mother.
I believe he's joking about your mother, sir. I don't even know if that's from a movie. I just like making.
No, the line is he's tooling us.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, but tooling with us. Anyways, yeah, you have more thoughts on this, so go for it. What are your thoughts and feels on? Well, first of all, what was your reaction to the actual teaser?
I guess I was sort of like, so all day I was kind of going back and forth. It's like, is there actually going to be a trailer, or is this just a TV spot? Because I kept hearing rumors back and forth, and I'm like, oh, I guess it's a TV spot. Okay, and I watched it, like, okay, and I moved on. I mean, look, I don't need to be marketed to this movie. I'm going to see it. That's what a Star Wars fan with a podcast does. If you're a diehard Star Wars fan, you're seeing this movie, guys. You don't, right? It's like Jon Favreau can come to the marketing just be Jon Favreau grabbing you from the YouTube, smacking you, and saying you're seeing this movie, and then walking off.
No, he doesn't even have to do that much. He just like a tweet, Blue Sky post. There is a Star Wars movie on this date. Be there or else.
Exactly. Exactly. I made Iron Man. Goodbye. But funny enough, I was watching Ken Knapsack and Joseph Scrimshaw this morning talking about it. And they actually brought up some interesting points of actual substance and analysis. So I'm going to talk about that first because I think they made a good point.
I have meant to watch it. I'll watch it later. But anyway, go for it.
No, about the actual teaser spot, not just the whole marketing around it.
Oh, sure.
And it's something I think we haven't talked a lot about lately, and that is, the story is Mando is handing the reins of the sled to Grogu, and I think maybe in some way that is somewhat symbolic of what this movie will be, because it's the Mandalorian is about Din. It's about the Mandalorian for the most part. It's his story. I think this is a sign for the first time that the Mandalorian and Grogu is as much an equal of this film as much as it's about Din, whatever that means, right? I think that Grogu has always been sort of the MacGuffin and kind of the thing everybody's looking for. Now he's just an equal part of this team. It is the Mandalorian and Grogu. They are a duo, right? I mean, even in the actual serious trailers that we've seen Grogu do more things, kind of be part of the missions, swimming by himself, taking out AT-ATs and whatnot. So I do wonder if that's a sign of these two are partners. It's as much about him as much about the Mandalorian. So I think from a substance, maybe that's something you can garner about the movie that is as much as Grogu's story as Din's this time around, in terms of, they're a partnership. They are the dynamic duo. They're the Batman and Robin of Star Wars. Neener, Batmando.
That's DC.
In terms of people freaking out about the marketing and stuff, I actually was reading a blog which I shared with you earlier, or did I just told you? And the actual schedule for the marketing is more or less on schedule with everything, with the exception of Force Awakens and Solo, where most Star Wars films, like Rogue One, Rise of Skywalker, Last Jedi, the first trailer was always 8 months before the movie. The full trailer was always 1 to 2 months before the movie. So Rise of Skywalker's first trailer was April 12th of 2019. Its full trailer, which is kind of like the true trailer, was October 21st, 2019, 1 month and 29 days. Rogue One was April 7th, 2016, 8 months before before the movie came out. Rogue One's full trailer was August 11th, 2016. Okay, that was 4 months before the trailer, so give or take. But Last Jedi was 2 months, 6 days with its full trailer. So again, in the ballpark. So schedule wise, we are still on track for regular marketing. Again, Force Awakens was different. They put their first trailer a year before the movie. But their full trailer for Force Awakens was 1 month and 29 days, so October 19th. And boy, did Solo get shortchanged with only having 3 months before its first trailer came out, and then 1 month beforehand. So damn. So that's Solo for you. But yeah, the gaps before their first trailers have always been 8 months, more or less, and Mando and Grogu is right on that schedule. And in terms of the marketing itself, I mean, I've sort of come to realize, thanks to just looking at analysis, and people they are marketing this film the same way the live-action Lilo and Stitch movie was marketed. A movie that made $1 billion in the box office. It beat Superman, and it beat Sinners. And I think that, and the marketing for that movie was just very much, here's Stitch. He's cute. He does silly things.
Yeah.
And then, then kind of a month or two before, that's when they started showing clips from the movie. Because most of the time, it was just not even clips from the movie. It's just, here's Stitch. He does the cute things. And go, oh my God. Right? So, will that work for Mando and Grogu? I don't know. Grogu is the closest thing we have to a Stitch in terms of look, it's Grogu. He's cute.
Yeah.
He does the baby. He does the magic hand thingy. Oh. I don't know if it's gonna make $1 billion, but
That'd be something. Yeah.
But it could make at least the money it needs to make, which is like 500 conservative.
Yeah.
Especially if you believe the budget for this thing isn't as isn't as big as it as as the other Star Wars films, which apparently that's a big deal. It's like good production, on budget, on time. Not inflated like Solo or the other films were. So
True.
it's it doesn't have far to go in terms of actual economic success unless something tragic happens. So there's that. So again, will it work? It beats me. I don't know. It worked for Lilo and Stitch, and that made $1 billion. And even though people didn't like it because it's a live action remake, and everyone hates those, still made $1 billion. So, and if you're a diehard Star Wars fan, you're seeing this anyway. For the most part, I mean, I doubt anyone who's not any of us in our circle are not going to see it unless they have like some moral qualm against it, or it's like I don't know, Jon Favreau was a terrible person secretly, or there was like AI. But it's like at this point,
Right.
if you're a diehard on like a Star Wars forum, you're probably seeing this film. And I'll caveat and say, look, I get it. If you are someone like us who's on a Star Wars forum or a Star Wars podcast, you prefer the trailers that are a little bit more plot heavy, lore heavy, whatever, then compared to look, it's Baby Yoda. He does the Baby Yoda stuff. But maybe that's all the general audience needs. Maybe all they need is just Baby Yoda. He do the cute thing. Which, let's face it, that's probably what most of this movie is. It's going to be a weird, action-packed Mando and Grogu just doing some weird stuff. Baby Yoda's going to be cute. And there's Rada, who's looking muscular and awesome.
Yeah.
So again, maybe that's just what this movie is. And will that succeed financially? I don't know. I think it has a good chance of doing it. We'll find out in some time. Although I will also say, just to be caveat, if they are not marketing this thing heavily by at least April, then I will be worried. But if I don't think so, I think we probably will get a trailer probably in March, maybe late February. So that's because that other Disney movie, the one that's making fun of Avatar, Beavers or something, is playing soon, and that's
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's an animated movie. It's another Disney. I think it's a Pixar film. Coming out, and it's like, that's sort of when they've been putting their Mando trailers from Zootopia and stuff like that. So so they might promote the next trailer in front of that. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts of like, it was cute. I think people are maybe have weird vibes about this because, Star Wars fans. But I could be wrong. This thing could bomb, and then everyone will be proven right. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, the one gamble with this trailer, I don't think it's a gamble to not show us any kind of substantive content. The one gamble is those tauntauns intentionally look like they're from 1980. That's the joke, right? They're supposed to look like that.
I heard Favreau actually directed this himself, so
yeah,
this was not somebody else doing this. This was Favreau himself.
But so the gamble is folks be like, oh, that looks weird. I don't know if I want to see that. The point is, I mean, the thing with this trailer, it's during the Super Bowl, where the one sporting event where more people are watching from all walks of life, all segments of society. It's the one sports game a lot of people watch a year. And so again, a whole range of folks. And and so I mean, again, I think the big thing was just this thing about marketing, right? It doesn't have to be this literal argument of look at this and how compelling it is. It could be, here's this ridiculous thing. Oh, you're going to remember it now.
Yeah.
And also, again, how many people watching this trailer, how many people watching the Super Bowl knew that this teaser was actually going to come at all?
Only the people who were following the news like crazy people. So, and they were probably going to see this film anyway.
How many people watching the Super Bowl knew there was a Star Wars coming out? So I think I'm not worried at all. I agree. It'd be hopefully by April they start to say, "Hey, this is what's actually happening." Kind of the big emotional hit of the film, like the Chewie we're home kind of thing. But by April,
Right.
I also again I like being trolled. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, and
but I'm weird that way.
I've heard good arguments to say, I mean, look, I've heard argument back and forth like they should have done the trailer, should have not. Like one argument against the trailer is like
Mhm,
how if they got a full trailer talked about like story plots and whatnot, like
mhm.
how much time does that dominate the news, especially with the Super Bowl, where let's
True.
face it, everyone's talking about no one's talking about the trailers or the TV spots really. They're talking
Mhm.
about the damn Bad Bunny versus whoever did the other
Chris Rock or whatever,
Chris
Kid
Rock
Rock,
or
whatever his name is,
Kim Rock or whatever. I don't
Kid
remember
Rock.
Kid Rock or whoever culture. I mean, I don't like
True.
the Turning Point USA, whatever thing. So it's like no one,
Yeah.
like even Supergirl had like a cute thing. It's like I only seen a couple posts on Blue Sky about it, and then
Mhm.
now everyone's talking about Kid Rock. So it's like,
Well, Bad Bunny is really
and Beth. I mean,
Like
I know
even in this ticker thing here, I talk about the Benito Bowl, right?
exactly. So
Which was an amazing, awesome display of
it might have
postal
gotten
protest.
drowned out anyway. So
Yeah.
with everything else, instead of like, and and that's something I'll just say. We
Mhm.
always kind of low key complain about why are you putting out a trailer on a random Tuesday in the middle of the afternoon in June.
Yeah.
Maybe that is why though, because it's like if nothing's going on, that's going to dominate the news for 24 hours in our short attention span, where we just
True.
go from thing to thing to thing to thing.
I mean,
Does news last
yeah,
24 hours anymore? It's right. Like I feel like we talked about. I feel like Greenland incident was like a century ago. And
yeah.
that's
I mean, well, what I was gonna, I mean, the thing is, I usually complain about when they announce a new comic book, right?
okay. I mean, that's fair.
That come on,
That's
announce
fair.
that at New York Comic Con or Celebration or whatever. But
Okay, that's
yeah, yeah. Hopefully they know when to release this thing, the real trailer, when it'll dominate the headlines, at least the entertainment headlines. Also to say again, like they did something. They did something bold at all, right? They thought this through. They said, let's do something silly and ridiculous. And because I mean,
the Super Bowl commercials are expensive.
yeah, they're $10 million, right?
Right.
And this one,
If not more.
Yeah,
More
and that Lucasfilm marketing, because my like it's a sign of life in Lucasfilm marketing to actually do. Like I my impression with them is like kind of, I don't know, sitting around trying to figure things out, always playing catch up.
Which
And
is
here
weird
they are
because I don't think that's actually as true as people say it is.
No, it probably isn't, but my impression of it was. And so here's the counter saying, no, we're ahead of the game. We're kind of setting you up for a more serious trailer in April. It's only February. Calm down. Here's something again silly and
More or less
ridiculous.
follows the pattern of the other Star Wars movies that were successful, with the exception of Force Awakens, which was a unique thing.
And also, let's spoof previous Super Bowl commercials. I mean, that's let's get Sam Elliott there and a vehicle that is rugged. I mean, some of you want about Tauntauns. They're rugged. They can survive that weather. So, yeah, I think that's about enough. We need to talk about this one, unless you have any further thoughts. But
nope, it's just Star Wars fandom is very tiresome.
Yes. So hence the trolling. Here for it. Alrighty. Go for it, Joel.
All right.
Lead us away.
And leadership in Star Wars. I am your leader. I'm just kidding. Okay. Star Wars and leadership. Star Wars is absolutely a morality tale at the end of the day. It's supposed to show us good moral lessons about leaders, about anything about being a good person. But real life is more complicated than that, as I think we've all can agree to. So I want to take some of these real life thoughts and ideas and see if we can't apply them to Star Wars leaders and kind of, maybe Star Wars leaders of the future. So I guess kind of the kind of, and I want to talk about it in terms of like what makes a good leader and also kind of focus on
Mhm.
the personality of a leader, the system in which the leader is leading, and the conditions and the material conditions and the context of which this leader is leading. Are they peacetime leaders? Are they wartime leaders? Are they
Mhm.
leaders of unstable countries where it doesn't matter how good you are, if you mess up, it is death. Regardless of your morals and whatnot. We are you're two first world white men. We don't have to worry about certain things that other leaders got to worry about. And, we'll talk about, and, we're mostly going to focus on political leaders because that's where Star Wars mostly talks about. But we can talk about corporate leaders and church leaders and military
Mhm.
leaders and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. Rebel leaders, of course. So yeah, and I think there's always the question every political scientist and their mother wants to ask: what is a good leader? And I think when we always ask that, I kind of always go, well, what is the context? What is the metrics of which we're measuring a good
Mhm.
leader? Is morality a factor? Is it is it what is the culture? Some cultures might measure their leaders differently. Is
Mhm.
there a universal human question? What's the word I'm looking for? Metric for
Mhm.
good leadership. What is to be good, right? And I have in my notes, does morality factor? I think if you're asking a certain age cohort and just normal Americans in general about
Mhm.
the Clintons, you know, well, people still like Bill Clinton as the president and have
Mhm.
good memories of him, despite the fact that he did terrible things to that. He did things to that intern, and he's on the list, along with Hillary.
Mhm.
There's that. Cultural factors, right?
Mhm.
You go to in Russia today, right now. Not all the former Soviet countries, but in Russia proper, Stalin is seen as a good, strong Russian leader.
Interesting.
He is up there. He is remembered for when the Soviet Union was strong and he
Hmm.
was the boss, and that nostalgia. I mean, it's nostalgia, like you know, and stuff like that. And then, also ideology too. Obviously,
Sure.
there are conservatives in Britain who love Margaret Thatcher. And stuff like that. So,
Mhm.
and Argentina, we got the Peronists are still a thing after 30, 70 years.
Mhm.
Um, it some leaders obviously historically have, you know, if there is love, it's still that core 10% of people. Like I think Hitler's kind of still thankfully there.
Mm.
Even the people who are kind of still want to emulate him are kind of like, well, he went maybe overboard. So he hasn't been completely redeemed just yet. I mean, there are
Mm.
definitely younger folks who are getting there, but it's like I still think it's like I'm talking about normies. Um, Mao in China is, he is the founder of modern China, and kind of he's still seen pretty positive.
Mhm.
Um, then obviously you got American leaders and stuff like that too. So I guess Matt, I guess I'm rambling. I'll toss it to
Yeah.
you.
Right.
Do you believe there is a universal human metric
Mhm.
to what quote unquote good leadership is?
Mhm.
I mean, I guess I'll say for myself, bad leadership is you definitely leave your country in ashes and stuff like that
Yeah.
for sure. But after the most extreme examples, what would you say is kind of like your thoughts on good leadership?
I mean, it's hard because I've thought about how that metric has changed in the last
Hmm.
just in you know the workplace. I think about workplace leadership, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think if there is a metric, it's um, is everyone contributing?
Hmm.
Now, what changes is what motivates people to contribute.
Hmm.
Um, you know, because one of the things now, and this is kind of, I don't know, this is in the weeds a little bit, but we talk about employee engagement,
Hmm.
for example, or political efficacy is the larger scale version of that.
Hmm.
People who are inspired to contribute because there's
Hmm.
a leader who can draw it out of them and say, hey, you're a part of the bigger whole.
Hmm.
And this is what you bring to the table. And we want to see that make up a bigger whole. And so that's been more contemporary or understood in a more contemporary way, in the sense of, we have group psychology, and even the concept of employee engagement is somewhat new. I think about in sports, for example, you want to push your athletes. A coach wants to push their athletes hard, but also there's a wider sense of the whole person is involved in this. Maybe that's also related to engagement, right? That there's the person is involved in this. So what's going on with their family, for example, will affect how well they do on the field. Even if there's a tragedy, it could actually inspire them to I won for my dad or whatever, but yeah, so
Can I push you about that just a little bit, though?
Sure.
Because those are qualities. But if historically, Hitler had those qualities too. There are lots of remember, like when people met him, like, oh, he had the charisma to
say
do terrible things. But
there's an effective leader. I mean, when we're saying the word good, we're talking about morality, right? The good and evil that are the heart of moral reasoning, right? The right thing to do, right? The right way to lead. So I mean, look, I'll say on the internet, on the YouTube right now, sure, Hitler was an effective leader.
Dun dun dun.
Was he a good leader? No, he was evil.
Yeah, okay.
The things he got people to do, because also he was, kind of getting at what I was saying before. He was an effective leader, but he ended up
power for evil.
Well, and what that does is it ends up destroying society. Right. He ended up elevating one social group and literally killing a whole bunch of others. We get the word genocide. So to say on a large scale he was a bad leader, and you could say even an ineffective leader, in the sense of, if the metric is guiding society towards the multiple parts of society, multiple actors and players can come together and form a social contract and say we're in this together and we're building this together. So it's why GDP can be a metric, economic growth can be a metric, because it does involve all these players in economic competition. But that's, again, being a social democrat here, like it definitely involves ensuring people have equitable opportunities to contribute. And so that's why, there's a small scale effective, and then there's large scale effective. And
say what you will about Palpatine and the Empire, you have to have some skill to become the emperor of the galaxy, right? I don't believe in great man theory per se, but I feel like people who want to dismiss the individual personalities of some of these people, I think, are doing a little bit of intellectual dishonesty. Because, like, could anyone else have done it? I mean, maybe, I don't know. In the fictional world, beat me. I don't know. That's the story they want to tell, right? But in, like, the real world, you look at the rise of Hitler. I was actually doing some videos about this, watching some video about it, and it's fascinating. It's like, by 1933, it really was a battle between the various right-wing groups in Germany who were going to just take power. It really was. Like, it was not left versus right. It was, which version of authoritarianism do you want, right? And it was just all these factions getting it together, trying to, do their thing. And Hitler outmaneuvered them all, and he became the chancellor, and then enabling it. You look at the post, Lenin's death. Lenin was the big man on campus. He did it. Revolution. He dies. Everyone thinks it's gonna be Trotsky because Trotsky did all these these great things, and in the eyes of the leadership of the Soviets. And nope, it's just this bureaucrat whose name's Stalin who won the day. He outmaneuvers Trotsky. He outmaneuvered all the other top dog Bolsheviks, and then became the Soviet leader for 30 or 25, 30 years. There. I don't. Again, I don't believe in great man theory, but I do think if you have that talent, you did something right. And then to use it on the good guy side for a hot second, we don't talk about all the dictators. Let's go to the rebel leaders for a hot second. Mon Mothma was not inherently seen as the natural leader of the rebels, be it all of them. People thought early on it's gonna be Saul because he was this charismatic youngin. That's kind of the whole point of the Mask of Fear book. Some people thought it was gonna be Bale because again, he was kind of this charismatic guy in the Senate. Everyone loved him. Obviously, Mon was not sinister in her outmaneuvering. In some ways, it was just kind of, Saw died, Bale got exploded. Mon's kind of the one left to do it. And obviously, but obviously, I think even Bale kind of knew maybe she was a lot more of an idealistic symbol for the rebels to rally around than even him, which I honestly kind of makes me wonder why. Not because I know obviously I'm sure obviously we love Mon Mothma. Ash, listening, we all love Mothmas, but it is interesting that of the two senators, it's Mon who kind of is sort of the clean symbol of the alliance and not Bale. And it makes me wonder, did Bale do more shady things in the Senate and maybe because I do know in Legends at least, or what little they did with Bale in Legends, they kind of made Bale was more willing to not go along with things, but he was more willing to play the fall guy of I'm gonna vote for Palpatine. I'm just look at me. I'm voting for you, Palpatine. I'm voting for you. Where obviously in reality, he said he's smuggling weapons and stuff. But in public, he was more it's the loyal senator. I vote for Palpatine's, authoritarian bill. Right? Yay. I'm kind of throwing some of my colleagues under the bus, but but in reality, I'm still smuggling things.
Yeah.
So where Mothma maybe was more the oh hi Daisy was more the bold voice of the opposition, and I do kind of wonder if that was a big reason why. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, in the end of the day, Mon had the personality, I guess, to kind of be the figurehead for all these disparate factions to rally around and kind of you can be in charge because you're good at balancing all of us compared to maybe Bale's a little more boisterous and Saul's just stubborn and he gets to go to Jeddah.
I mean, I think when it comes to Andor looked at this right and said the show showed this that Bale would take the hit, if you will, of staying on Coruscant and working within the system, and Mon had to go, and part of that was, Bale's conscience was weighed down by Gorman, but Mon's was pricked. Mon's was nudged.
I just always headcanoned it, by the way, that he also needed to install Leia as the senator because then he was going to and then Leia can be the spy in the Senate, and he can go to Yavin and do his thing.
Sure. And so the effect of that was, in maybe the public perception within the rebellion, was that maybe not necessarily Bale was a sympathizer or anything, but wasn't even in mind as much, even though he would go to Yavin and be part of the meetings, but he was still in the Senate, and Mon Mothma became the leader. What I want to see is more about Bale as a martyr, because we don't think we've gotten much of that yet. We do a bit in Bloodline, but during the rebellion, right after, we don't even get much of that in the comics from A New Hope to after A New Hope. So to see someone like that way, he could be a leadership figure for the rebellion after his death, by his absence, right? What was I going to say? Yeah, well, the great man theory. So here's the thing, and this is kind of what I glean from, I watched Chris Kempshaw's panel with Ellie from Star Wars Celebration, and they go into this. They go into Great Man Theory, and what my sense there is, it's not that the insights of Great Man Theory are necessarily wrong. It's just that it's not the whole picture. And the critique was, this is being the whole picture, and this is this model for how well, for what leadership could look like, but also for how history moves and how historical movements grow and emerge. And it's more complicated than that. But there, in Rise and Fall, well, Montefiore Kim Shulkin dedicates a whole chapter to Palpatine, right? There is an element of that. Just like with the story of the rebellion, you'd have to devote a whole chapter to Mon Mothma. There's an element of great person theory in there, at least needing, and that's maybe that's the thing with leadership. So maybe to even answer your question, kind of bring it back, right? Like leadership today, maybe it's universal, but all I know is that leadership today is often about the focusing on the importance of good leaders, of strong leaders, of bold leaders who have a clear vision for where to go, and the importance of, within leadership, the way to bring that about is to motivate people by giving them the resources and the encouragement and the structure and whatnot to contribute, in the sense that they're contributing meaningfully to this vision and to have a say in that vision. I mean, we're talking about political efficacy, right? People who care about the larger the larger vision, the larger direction, but aren't necessarily in a leadership position themselves, to have that open door, to have that place of feedback, to encourage it, to actively encourage it, to even seek it out. That is now part of good leadership. So what I'm getting at is, our understanding of leadership now is a sense of the importance of the leader and the importance of not followers but contributors. It's both. And so, I think about in churches today, in the parish church and in wider bodies. I mean, even Catholics are moving in this direction. Looking at the importance of sharing in leadership roles with the people who are following, right? With the people who are a part. It's not following, because we think of following as kind of this, you're not having an agency in your own. That's not the model anymore. The model is your agency is part of this wider whole. And so is the case of our leader. So yeah, I mean, and to bring it all back then, the great man theory, the insight is the importance of the strong leader. Without it, I mean, without a strong leader, and by strong leader I mean a confident, self-aware, measured leader who takes feedback, takes input, but can really establish a tone and a structure and a way forward. That's that insight. But without anyone to contribute, that's the critique, right? Without anyone to contribute, what's the leader doing? There's no one to lead. So
exactly. I kind of want to take that's a good segue into kind of the opposite approach of like, when the contributors are maybe the problem and not the leader. So systems, Palpatine and Mon are the establishers of their systems. Obviously, Mon just reinstates the New Republic. She built the New Republic. Palpatine, of course, builds the Empire. Got to go into some alternate universe history, folks. But let's say Palpatine died naturally and the Empire doesn't fall, and just they got another emperor. It's Palpatine Jr. or I don't know, the Fells took over the Fell Empire. All hail. The system. It's the question of, does the system eat you? Can you change the system without breaking it? Can you reform it, etc., etc.? We have historical parallels of this with Khrushchev, um,
Mm.
who did haphazardly try to reform the Soviet Union. There
Right.
were some successes, in the Soviet, the terrors kind of ended, although they were kind of ending already in the 50s and things kind of were stabilizing even then.
Mhm.
But, the cadres in the Soviet Communist Party, like no longer got executed. The totalitarian nature
Mhm.
kind of, it was still there, but it kind of, they sort of, it really just kind of just became
Mhm.
usual authoritarianism. Um, and Khrushchev tried to change a lot of things economically about the Soviet Union, um, but because of his kind of his own incompetence and the fact he got them stuck in the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Mhm.
Communist Party kind of like, nope, you're changing too much and it's very haphazard, you're out.
Yeah.
But you don't get to die, so congrats, you did something right there. And Brezhnev
Right.
kind of took over, just kind of like, okay, we're just gonna not do anything, and we're not gonna change anything. I'm not
Right.
gonna become a full on, mass executions or whatever. Just
Mhm.
gonna just stay with it. And Gorbachev kind of takes over. He tries his haphazard approach, and then the Soviet Union collapses for a bunch of reasons.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the thing about that is, if you
Mhm.
inherit a system that's very much about whoever the guy on top is,
Mhm.
um, you kind of gonna get a double edged sword of like you're inheriting a system that's so very personality driven
Mhm.
that it really does depend on the personality of the
Yeah.
leader. Like, like the Tsar, it's like if you
Mhm.
get a wimpy Tsar, you get Nicholas II. Well, when you get the collapse of the Russian Empire.
Mhm. Yeah.
Who also did not have clear vision and was also very kind of maybe I'll do this. No, I want to do that. Like very whereas if you get a system that at least isn't as personality driven,
Mhm.
wimpy leaders don't, or bad leaders, just leaders who don't really have clarity of vision. They don't break the system. It's just like, you're just kind of boring. It's like older
Mhm.
presidents pre the 20th century. It was like, before after Lincoln, but before Teddy Roosevelt. It's like, you get a couple boring presidents. So it's like, they don't destroy the whole country.
Mhm.
Or parliamentary prime ministers who are like, yeah, they last maybe 2 years and then they're out and then somebody else
Mhm.
takes over. Like, they don't.
Yeah.
It's not like Canada gets destroyed by a wimpy prime minister.
Mhm.
Compared to like and that's a parliamentary system.
Yeah.
But it is a kind of but like if let's say Palpatine died and then the new emperor came and he is the most beloved. He is a true. He does not believe in Death Stars. He does not believe in racism. He does not believe in genocide. Um, you know,
We
the,
said
I
genocide.
mean, that's
Sorry.
the thing. Can he reform the
Mhm.
empire,
Yeah.
or will the empire as a system that's kind of based on backstabbing, betrayal,
Mhm.
me, evil and all that horrible stuff? Does that, you know,
Yeah.
does he get stabbed in the back before he even had a chance?
Right.
Whereas, if the First Order hadn't blown up Coruscant, yeah, you probably still get some wimpy chancellors after but
Hosnian Prime.
after Hosni Prime. But the Republic was kind of meant to not have strong executive leadership
Mhm.
anyway. That was kind of the whole point. So it didn't seem like yeah, there seemed to be gridlock, but it didn't seem like the Republic was about to collapse.
Sure.
It got blowed up, but it didn't fall under its own weight, which is kind of
Mhm.
what compared to the old Republic, which did,
Yeah.
thanks to Palpatine kind of making everything worse.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's an interesting question of like, or I'll toss this to you, Matthew.
Mhm.
Look at the popes and his reforms.
Yeah.
He's how it's really hard to unentrench you
Mhm.
know hundreds of years of institutional memory and systems and stuff like the Opus D, and if that's gonna happen or not. I think some popes probably are maybe more clever enough to get some of it done. I think in terms like
Mhm.
Francis and the new guy might
Leo.
be a
Yeah.
lot more. They know how the system works. And that's what I always find interesting about reformers. And I'll pass it on to you.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think the best reformers, in some weird way, are the most insiders, or the ones
Yeah.
who maybe they have their hands dirty because they
Mhm.
did all the stuff, like a Khrushchev to some extent,
Yeah.
because he was Stalin's in number two, was in Stalin's inner circle and signed a lot of the lists. But it's also
Mhm.
like he knows how the system works. He knows where the dead bodies are, and in some ways, it's like
Mhm.
he knows how to change it because he knows he just like, oh, I got to put pressure here, push pressure here. Whereas maybe an
Yeah.
outsider is not the person to always reform something because like they don't know how any of this works.
Mhm.
It's a double-edged sword, and it's not
Yeah.
always completely one-to-one, and sometimes it doesn't happen. But I'll toss it to you, Matthew, in terms of like where do you see systems,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, can the system overrun even the well-intentioned leaders?
So I have a joke for you, Joel.
Yeah.
How many Anglicans does it take to change a light bulb?
How many?
My grandmother donated that light bulb. Don't you dare change it. So that's the ongoing joke, right? Is
Right.
people who are very much, the status quo is doing fine. Why do we need to change the status quo?
Mhm.
It's doing fine for me. Why do we
Mhm.
need to change it? I'm enjoying it. And yeah, there is a real culture of, I mean, on the one hand, there is definitely a strong culture of we've always done it this way before, so why change it? There's also a culture of let's change things up because I'm bored. Let's change it for the sake of changing.
That's
I mean,
the
that's
Trump
why.
phenomenon. That's the Trump.
Yeah. I mean, let the past. That's why I love this film. Let the past die. Kill it if you have to.
Right.
Or, I mean, I think Luke is incredibly beholden to the past in The Last Jedi. He's pretty much, this is the legacy. It's time for it to end. But, I mean, maybe he's not so much like that, but there's still a negotiation with, what are we holding on to, right? What are we holding on to with the past? Yeah, you bring up a good point. Putting on my day job hat for a bit. There's definitely a bit of a pattern of one pope dislodges things, and then there's one kind of bit of an outsider pope dislodges things.
Mhm.
Then an insider pope comes in and actually implements who believes in what his predecessor was doing, but implements it, knows how to implement. I mean, that's John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, right? The very much the John the 23rd shocks everybody by calling Vatican II. This is in 58. Dies in 1962 or in 63 after the first session. Paul the 6th, who was I think Pius the 12th kind of number 2 guy, he becomes pope, and he actually knows how to implement these reforms.
Mhm.
Similar sort of John Paul II and Benedict XVI. John Paul was out there in the world, traveled more than any other pope combined. Wasn't as hands-on in terms of internal things, and so along comes basically the guy who was heading the most important office in the Vatican for decades. He's pope, and he's a lot quieter of a personality.
We talking about the current pope or the?
So I'm talking about Pope Benedict XVI, and then, but then you mentioned Francis. He's out there. He's saying all sorts of stuff, putting the Vatican PR through its paces, and then brings in, and then the next pope, the current pope, is Pope Leo, was someone who led his order in Rome, and then for 2 years led one of the most important offices. A lot quieter of a personality too. So this is kind of getting at the personality traits, right? Is someone who, the lesson at least is you can have good PR. You can say, not say good PR, but I mean, the thing with Francis is that his charisma, his off the cuff, outsider kind of things he'd say, like, who am I to judge? And everyone's welcome, everyone. But it came across internally, actually. I should be. I'm speaking on my own views here. A lot of folks were, what's he doing? We have these ways of doing things. I don't like this. But along comes Leo to say, I know you don't like it, but here's how I'm gonna help you through it and resource you through it. Not that Francis didn't do that either. I'm trying to think of a Star Wars parallel to that. I mean,
I mean,
I think
I got some examples.
sure.
I mean, okay, so I kind of got weird two examples of because you
Mm.
were thinking about that, and this is kind of a
Actually, I
weird.
do have one.
Oh,
I thought of one.
okay.
Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan uh, are kind of the case in point. Qui-Gon comes in. He refuses a seat on the council. He's trying to tell them there's something brewing here, and this Sith Lord is the first step in this bigger thing, bigger change coming. This is Jody Houser's brilliant Age of Republic comic, one shot.
Mhm.
Read that comic because he's trying to say you guys are. I mean, and the Living Force, you guys are stuck in the council chambers, trying to contemplate how many angels Diego condensed in the head of a pin, whereas all these groups, these pirate groups, are running, causing havoc with normal people out in the wedge, in the slice there, kind of outer rim, mid rim. And then Obi-Wan, he's learned everything he can from Qui-Gon. He's got to handle this kid, this prodigy, grows up to be this almost Qui-Gon-esque in his Anakin's almost Qui-Gon-esque in his kind of outsider, off the wall brazenness, but without the moral rectitude, the sense of this wider mission, wider galaxy. So at the same time, Obi-Wan has to rein him in a little bit, has to work within the system to say, oh, something is coming. Qui-Gon taught me to be mindful of the living force, to be sensitive to what is happening out in the galaxy. How am I going to do that with my quieter personality, my sense of, okay, this is what's important being on the council. It has a role too. He does accept the leadership role. He does accept the role of the council and is able to do the best he can in an impossible situation. That's my read of Qui-Gon, of Obi-Wan. Clearly wouldn't never. He says Qui-Gon would never have joined Darth Tyrannus. Anakin does. I mean, takes his place. But yeah, I think that's the closest I can think of in that way. So,
I mean, I've always found it kind of funny whenever people compare, Palpatine to Trump or even Hitler to some extent, because Trump and there is kind of if there are similarities, it's like they are the outsiders. It's like Trump was a TV star before he became president. Hitler was a rabble rousing movement leader before he became the chancellor. Palpatine was a ding dang senator for 20 something years. He was the quiet one. Everyone just liked him. That's kind of it. It's like, oh, he's the unassuming, right? It's like there's just Palpatine just in the Senate doing his thing, and then he, if anything, Palpatine is the ultimate insider who becomes the chancellor and becomes emperor. He reforms the republic from within in the most ultimate insider way. He's not a movement leader in any sense of the word. And, and in some ways, his Mon Mothma being his opposite, she too is the ultimate insider. She was in the Senate as long as him. I don't know if as long as him, but definitely. Well, she's older, so but as definitely for a long time. And then the Imperial Senate, she probably knows how it all kind of works to some extent. And maybe in some ways, that's kind of the reason why she was the best place to rebuild the New Republic, because she kind of knew where a lot of the bureaucrats still lie and whatnot, and can kind of at least patch up something enough where the galaxy's not in total collapse and chaos after the Empire falls. Just taking the reins of that bureaucracy and trying to rejuggle it and refocus it, and obviously get the Senate back, obviously. So she is the ultimate insider again, reforming the galactic government from within. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. It's like they're not the outsider who's kind of throwing a wrecking ball of anything. They are the two
True.
insiders of galactic politics, in some strange way.
I mean, with Mon Mothma, it's interesting. I mean, I kind of see her. I see what you mean in terms of getting the skills and experience from being in the Senate.
I mean, she's not like the Grand Vizier of the inner circle of the Empire, but she's still an
No,
insider for all intents and purposes.
Mon Mothma is interesting because she reinvents herself, and we see in Andor season 2 the way her clothing changes, her hair changes to match what we have in Rogue One and in Return of the Jedi. But she goes from being an insider to an outsider, I think, and that's interesting. In order for her to be more of an insider in the rebellion, and that's another thing with leadership is Pope Francis would talk about smelling like the sheep. That scene where she's just sitting at the table at that long table with her cousin, whose name I'm blanking on because I was blank on names. Just there among everyone else. She doesn't hide in her office anymore. I do get what you mean in terms of that experience. Although, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if she's sort of the ultimate insider anymore, but maybe she does still care. Well, the way she still carries insider assumptions is it's the alliance to restore the Republic, right? It's not the alliance to burn it all down and create something new entirely. And so, yeah, there's that. The
Well, she
different
definitely
goals.
probably is able to kind of understand the galactic bureaucracy she's low
Yes.
key inheriting once the Empire collapses around
Oh,
her.
for sure. Yeah, that's true. Once she becomes this first minister or whatever.
Chancellor.
Sure.
No, that's
Whatever.
the title. But she's the
Okay.
chancellor.
Okay. Fair. That thing with Palpatine, interestingly though, yeah, he's definitely an insider and definitely the quiet insider. He uses his outsider status to get elected, though, right? He's like, well, yeah, my world's being blockaded by the Trade Federation and invaded, and the governor of Theta has been rounded up, and look at how grieving my Queen Padme is. Why isn't the Republic doing anything? Look how horrible the Republic is, treating us all Nubians like outsiders. Vote for me, and I'll make you all insiders. That's his plan. But of course,
Right.
he's being the ultimate insider by doing that. But
Yeah. And since we're getting to the final hour, let's
Mm.
talk about kind of the third point. And again, all these points do come together.
they do.
We're talking about Palpatine and Mon Mothma, even though I have Poe and Leia on here.
Mhm.
But I think this is all fun. That is the context and material conditions of which these leaders lead.
Mhm.
I've talked about it before, Matthew. We're white, middle class, first worlders. We
Mhm.
live in even America, as messed up as it is right now, it's got nothing on say what's going on in Africa, in
Or
Russia,
Iran.
Ukraine, Iran,
Iran, yeah.
right? We're not, we have our problems,
Mhm.
but our material we're still a rich nation. Our society hasn't completely unraveled to that point yet. Hopefully it never will.
Right.
But we're definitely, we're still. Um
It's not a
some
failed state.
to quote a captain of the Deep Space Nine, there are no saints in paradise.
Mhm.
How do you be a good leader when you're not in paradise? And I think that is something very interesting because let's face it, another thing about leaders, they gotta make harsh choices. They gotta make tough choices.
Mhm.
You know, Pope Francis can reform the church, and probably gotta make some tough choices about who he keeps around. But it's not like he gotta can purge people,
Mhm.
right? This is something I think Star Wars. The thing. If you want to treat the New Republic like a revolution,
Mhm.
well, what? And we talked about this earlier. What do you do with the people who don't want the new government?
Yeah.
This is something every revolutionary government has to deal with. Every new government has to deal with, regardless. Like,
Mhm.
What do you do with the people? Like, what did the American? I mean, I actually don't know this because I don't study. Or I don't study American history that much. What do American colonists do with with the British loyalists?
Yeah.
Still, what do what the Soviets had to make some harsh, very harsh
Mhm.
decisions on what to do with Tsarist loyalists after they overthrew the Tsar, and
Mhm.
they didn't want a Soviet government. They wanted the Tsar back, and they were going to fight for that. And what do you do with
Mhm.
that? Um, I'm what do you do with what does Quebec got to do with the separatists who don't want to fight, who want to keep fighting for it?
Mhm.
And this is sort of the question, I think, not in terms of both in terms of building your system, of course, but also
Mhm.
in terms of making sure your system lasts. Is what
Yeah.
what do you do when you have nothing really to go for? You're not rich,
Mhm.
when you don't have very limited resources. When
Mhm.
let's face it, most of these revolutions, like the Soviet Revolution, wasn't like revolution in the Soviet Union. It was revolution. Oh, civil war. Oh shoot, foreign
Yeah.
powers are invading us. We're surrounded on all sides. Like they're trying to kill us, man. If we don't do something, we're gonna die, right?
Yeah.
We see a little bit of this in aftermath, obviously, with the loyalist of the empire being like trying to assassinate Mon Mothma. I mean, let's face it, they tried to kill her and they almost succeeded.
Mhm.
Um, and Jakku, kind of their last desperate stand. Um, it's sort of the tough questions of what do you do afterwards in
Yeah.
those conditions. And people have said, oh, there are things the Soviets could have done to be less brutal, and obviously, look, they made decisions that in the long run would come to bite them in the butt.
Yeah.
Hang on, I think my thing. There's actually things weirdly enough the communists in China kind of learned because it's weird. Chinese communists are fascinating because like
Mhm.
they're not as brutal as the Soviets had to be when they took power. In fact, one of the biggest examples of that, funny
Mhm.
enough, little tangent, but I'm here, is the last Chinese emperor, Puyi, who
Mhm.
was the last Chinese emperor in the 20th century. He got deposed. He went to Japan. He then became a puppet ruler for the Japanese during World War II. The Chinese caught him at the end. The communists caught him, but instead of killing him, they put him in an intern camp for years of
Mhm.
re-education, and then they let him out, and he kind of got to live his life kind of quietly in the last few years as just kind of a gardener, as
Mhm.
like, in a weird sense, it is the ultimate what people mean when we're like, we want to proletarianize you. We want like taking away the
Mhm.
power of the bourgeoisie doesn't mean we're going to kill everybody. It
Right.
just means you're not going to be rich anymore. Like in a perfect world where violence
Mhm.
wasn't a thing, it's not like we would hang Elon. It was not like we take Elon Musk and to the eat the rich. It'd just be like
Yeah.
you just wouldn't be rich anymore, buddy. You'd live a normal apartment like everybody else. Maybe you'd be happier without all that money and
You
sadness.
think?
Maybe I don't
Maybe.
know, right? You know, um, and
Mhm.
we see attempts by this in the New Republic with like the New Republic reintegration program.
Mhm.
And obviously, we do know that they did try some people. Moff Gideon apparently did go to trial for war crimes. Apparently, he didn't escape. Apparently, that's what. But they did clearly
Mhm.
try some people. Um,
Mhm.
but it's how, or I'm gonna let's move away from Mon Mothma for a second.
Yeah.
Let's
Well,
go
I
to
do have
Duchess.
an answer to your question though.
Let's go
Like,
to
what he would
like
do?
Duchess Satine. Like she wants to be a pacifist and
Yeah.
all that's well and good, but wars keep knocking on your doorstep, and no one wants to give you the time of day, and they're just gonna
Mhm.
kill you anyway. How do you be a pacifist when it's like, well, the other side doesn't want to be pacifist. We're just gonna destroy you.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, uh, it's something. It's like how hard. Can you be the nicest, moralistic, standing leadership?
Mhm.
How do you stay that way when you're in hell? Pretty much. That's
Right.
kind of my go-to answer for everything.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like you said, there's no saints in
There's no
wars, or
saints in
no
paradise.
saints in paradise, or whatever. You know what it. Um. Yeah. So two things. I mean, this is kind of what I was getting at before. Is it's around the dinner table. It's around the Thanksgiving table. Yeah. There are is criminal justice, right? And that in order for any kind of faith and credibility in the system to return, that needs to actually be used. There needs to be accountability. Like I mentioned, the Nuremberg trials, but also think about South Africa, Truth and Reconciliation, right? Telling the stories of what happened in ways that are impossible to deny, impossible to turn, and getting people to see the reality that they've buried, the impact of their actions, maybe without the fear of too many consequences, right? Like you're talking with Elon Musk, for example. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. There's no ethical billionaires, but there are ethical 100,000aires, But there are also no ethical people, if you could say that much. I mean, that's complicated, but so and that's kind of what my whole thing with if some Trump voters, the thing I was saying before, no good people support this. Well, it's what do you do afterwards? Trying to just have this all or nothing wipe them out. It's the same mentality that they have, and we got to do better. We got to because it's just going to repeat the cycle of violence. Now, maybe I'm talking kind of hippy dippy, airy fairy, idealistic language here, but this isn't just a political system to rebuild here. This is society to rebuild, a civilization almost to rebuild. And it doesn't, we can't separate kind of the spirit of the age from the functioning of it. We got to actually have conversation, learn how to have conversations again. We have to learn how to express our fears again. I mean, one of the things that's been really encouraging is regarding gender and how the redefinition of masculinity is becoming one that can embrace vulnerability, embrace struggle, or embrace the need for others, dependence on others. The self-made man is proving itself to be a lie. So maybe that can translate into other areas. I don't have any kind of systematic, concrete answers other than wealth redistribution and ensuring, public commons, right, transportation, other public goods, to provide opportunities for people. But again, what's the tenor of our conversations? What's the way in which what are we training our kids to do? Are we training our kids to actually investigate arguments, and are we training our kids to frankly not feel so offended? I know this is actually something that conservatives have talk a good game about. They're completely hypocritical about it often. But talk a good game about saying, being able to listen to horrible, terrible ideas, offensive thoughts, and not be offended by them, but just not accept them, but maybe understand the person in front of you. And I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. Social media is like I talked about Instagram. That's been a real a real hurt to this, and one of the things we're gonna have to have a reckoning about when the dust settles is how much the rage bait algorithm is responsible for all of this, right?
Right.
As much as the rage bait algorithm driven by corporate interests, but just like there's going to have to be a reckoning for evangelical Christian nationalism. Also, going to have to be a reckoning for progressive digital activism to some extent.
I mean, I go back to kind of decisions made during, I don't know, the Soviet Russian Civil War and stuff like that. And, did they go too far? Did they not? That's always a debate. 20, I got to read like 100 books just to even get a good answer. And even then, you don't get a good one. But, it's like leaders got to make tough choices. If we got to establish, say, a secret police because your country's under siege and you don't know what's going on, is that the right thing to do? Is it not? If you don't, then you might end up your new thing they're trying to
Right.
build might end up dead. But if you do, how do you have restraints on that so you don't go overboard? And then you get a
Yeah.
security. Like I gotta think when Mon Mothma was establishing the New Republic after the fall of the Empire, she's like
Mhm.
obviously I'm sure she's thinking about freedom and whatnot, but I think she's realistic and smart enough to think like, well, look, obviously I don't want to, we're not going to repress our people, but how do I handle, like, say, January 6th rioters in the new capital? If they're like, if I don't know,
Yeah.
Chandrilla doesn't seem like let's say like there's a Chandrilla capital, like we're going to storm the new Senate and restore Palpatine because he's totally alive and we believe it. Like, what do? Does
Mhm.
Mon Mothma have to sign the order that says fire into the crowds, or like, or if like, or
Mhm.
obviously send in the obviously hope you get some trained riot cops or whatever, but like even
Mhm.
then it's like they get it too unruly, you gotta some at least maybe fire your blaster into the sky or something. There's definitely, we have these situations for a reason, obviously. Or we gotta take back the Senate building because it's been occupied by crazy people, right?
Mhm.
That's not gonna be completely peaceful. That's a tough decision to make.
Yeah.
Obviously and that's obviously, and these are leaders in good faith. It's not like
True.
Palpatine who's like, "Ooh, yeah, I get to crush these peaceful protesters because I love being evil." Like it's just Mon
Mhm.
Mothma being like, "These are rioters in the streets who want the Empire back. What do I do? Do I just
Mhm.
let them have it? Do I mean, obviously, I'm sure she's thinking like, well, you gotta use something, right? You got,
Mhm.
right? If they're fire, or if they're starting to fire blasters at you, what do you do, right?
Mhm.
There are tough decisions in those contexts, and that's like just riots. I'm talking about when you're in civil war and
Yeah.
your country's on collapse. What do you do? It's a hard question.
Yeah. I mean the issue. I mean, so let's take ICE for example, right? I mean, the argument in favor is governments have the right to protect their borders and protect their population, right? And the issue is it's this unaccountable gang of thugs
Mhm.
who go in and rounding up civilians, right? They aren't actually they're making these communities far more dangerous, you know, in a situation that was actually more peaceable, right? If there is, war zone. I mean, UN peacekeeping, peacemaking, responsibility to protect, it's
Mhm.
complicated.
Mhm.
What are we pulling all the levers
Mhm.
to incentivize, say warlords in the DRC or in South Sudan or wherever?
Mhm.
Are we pulling all the levers to say, no, wait a minute, let's actually move toward a peaceful solution here, peaceful response? Or are we just sending in troops, sending in police actions, if you will? It's that's part of the problem is, um, you know, the use of force in domestic contexts and in global contexts. It's the
Well, here's
empire.
my
It's the
question.
new republic, right?
Well, here's my question, Matthew. If there was a
Mm.
January 6th in Canada and they
Yeah,
stormed the parliament,
yeah.
what do you want the prime minister to do?
Oh, well, I want them to be arrested.
What if they don't want to go peacefully? What if they got their guns? I mean,
Yeah.
it's Canada. They don't have guns. But let's pretend this is
Well,
crazy Canada. Like,
no,
but
they'll
maybe
have guns. They'll have guns.
they got their guns. They're like they're just gonna fire. What do you do?
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, they got to be incapacitated. I'm not an expert on security, also, but
No,
I mean, my point being, these even I mean, the whole defunding movement after George Floyd, right? It's that this is a this is the empire. These police forces. Although we're in this weird situation where, like I was messaging with you with Minnesota, with Minneapolis, we're trusting the police and the National Guard more than these unaccountable thugs.
well, that's
Um,
why I think defund the police was never going to go far because here's the thing:
yeah,
people still want law enforcement.
yeah,
Obviously, we can have a discussion about these ultra militarized law enforcement. Like, why do the police department need
that's what
tanks?
I'm getting at. Is
But it's like people still
yeah,
want law enforcement. ICE is only 20 years old. It's been around since the Bush administration.
yeah,
It's not even that old of an organization.
yeah. So my point being, um, like, well, I guess maybe the reason I was reacting that way is, the argument uh, in favor of a stronger police presence and or continuing a stronger police presence
Mhm.
is because what if there's this great terrorist attack that happens and we need to respond to keep everybody safe? I mean, here's the thing about pacifism, right? There's different types of pacifism. If someone was, someone kicked our door down and was starting to yell at us, we'd try and get him out, and hopefully we call the police. If someone was causing a disturbance at my church,
Mhm.
and we'd have the person removed.
Right.
But that's this small, incredibly rare. Actually, our door was kicked in a couple of years ago.
Oh, yikes.
And then they left, but we got the police and they were fine. They were recording everything and their own interactions, all that. But yeah, and it turned out okay. Be pacifism doesn't mean you necessarily defend the vulnerable, like Luke in the Mandalorian episode, right?
Right.
Versus Luke in the Last Jedi,
Right.
right? To be a pacifist means we want to create the conditions where this kind of response isn't necessary, and it's a wider view. In the moment, yeah, to your point, to answer your question, I mean, when there was a terrorist attack in Ottawa, the British High Commissioner was assassinated.
Ooh, yikes.
People asked by these radical Quebec separatists. This is in the 70s.
Mhm.
Someone stopped Pierre Trudeau, who's prime minister. It's like, we're going to see troops on the streets? Really? Just watch me. This is a response. And it's kind of cringy now, but it's incredibly limited, right? And there's a review. Our Emergency Powers Act is the kind of thing we want. It's it's very time limited. It's accountable to Parliament. 6 months later, there's a review and says if this was the right call or not. And so that's what I'm getting as what we kind of think we need. It's
right.
Not the Empire; it's the New Republic. Whereas
I mean, yeah.
what we have with ICE and we saw with George Floyd was the Empire.
I mean, I think that's ultimately where, I think where Mon and Palpatine obviously differ in terms of the crisis, where Palpatine's unlimited power to save. He thinks that saves the day,
Yeah.
and probably doesn't think that saves the day. He just wants it.
Mhm.
Where Mothma is the opposite. She is limited power, right? Where it's like, I don't think she's naive to know that. Look,
No.
sometimes you might have to put troops on the streets in as crisis.
Yeah.
But it's a very limited thing. Like are laws in place here. There are checks. It's like you only do it for like 6 hours and that's it. Doesn't matter what's happening. You gotta stop. Where it's like I think that's ultimately what Mon Mothma was trying to do in her conditions.
Mhm.
And I think this is something leaders have trouble. A lot of this is maybe the difference between a moral leader and an amoral. I don't know if that's even true too, but that's certainly it's
Mhm.
certainly something that a lot of leaders don't have trouble doing. Of they limit themselves. It's like it's a little self-discipline sometimes, but it's like, or when they're building a system of like not so much checks and balances, because I actually have like a very kind of controversial take on checks and balances, to some extent, but definitely hard limits on things that you
Yeah.
can do and for how much time and what you can do.
Yeah.
And why I say I don't consider it checks and balances per se
Mhm.
is like, in Canada, I mean, it's parliamentary democracy. Parliament dominates.
Mhm.
Party prime minister is like, Justin Trudeau can pretty much. I mean, Mark Carney is kind of a dictator in some ways. I mean, I'm not saying that, but it's like he got
It
the
is more complicated than that.
complicated by that, but like he got the majority in Parliament, and
Yeah.
he can pass laws. But Canada's got lots of limits on what the government can and can't do, and they're very
Mhm.
hard. So that is a limited government, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
definitely the big thing there, and I think that's I think that's another thing about leaders, and maybe where the personality part kind of go back to the beginning is like, is this a leader okay with limits on their leadership, like
Yeah.
hard limits, or it's like they don't want limits. They think that they get rid of those limits to achieve their goals.
Hmm.
And that's like obviously the big difference ultimately between Palpatine and Mon Mothma. And I'm so sorry we've only focused on those two. I thought we could
Those are
focus.
actually the biggest examples of leaders, though. That makes sense.
They are the
I'm
political
here for
leaders
it.
for
I'm here
certainly.
for it.
So they're
Yeah.
definitely. And it's like again. I mean, let's use the Jedi Council for a second, and
Yeah.
why Jedi are different than Sith. Yeah,
Mhm.
Yoda is the leader of the Jedi. He's
Yeah.
the Grand Master, but the Council has limits. They can't just dictate everything.
Right.
I mean, they can definitely close down temples and stuff like that, but they can't like force Qui-Gon to do something he doesn't want to do.
Hmm.
There's a limit to their power too. You
Yeah.
know, even rebel leaders have limits on their own powers per se. I
Hmm.
mean, that was kind of their thing. So I think that's the final kind of point is like
Yeah.
leaders who are okay with the limits, both in terms of the real world, but
Hmm.
also in terms of what they can do even in a good situation. And then
Hmm.
there'll be like Palpatine who don't want limits. They want unlimits.
Yeah. If you had asked George Washington, told George Washington that 250 years later, the president of the United States, on the one hand, and the King of England, the United Kingdom, whatever, on the other, ask them which one do you think is more in favor of democracy than the other? What would he have said?
Although I know some founding fathers would look at what the presidency become and go like, finally, that's what we wanted in the first place.
I know, but the idea, at least for the revolution with George Washington, so that the great irony, right, is this bloke across the pond, Charles III, it's like democracy, environmental sustainability, and sounding the alarm for global warming before it was popular, and Trump being Trump, it's this great irony there. What I'll say there, and the point making with the Jedi and the rebellion is, uh do you celebrate the limits that soft power puts on your authority, or do you see it as a threat, right? So, talking about Venezuela, for example, the soft power of international norms of sovereignty, which is, I guess it's kind of a soft power, right?
Certainly
There's
something that
no,
should be respected, yes.
it's a soft power. Do you respect that? Do you say, um, that's the thing with, say, Charles III. Technically, he could sign something uh, and do what he wants, but then there would be a
He's
there would be a
technically
republic.
commander in chief of the military. He can tell them to do something.
Then there would be a republic the next day.
Exactly.
So, and there's nothing written down that would say otherwise. It's just that's how their system works. Of course, their system, the Westminster system, is designed for a strong executive that leads the legislature. That is the Westminster system. In Canada, we have this interesting wrinkle on it. Our version of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is peace, order, and good government, and it's an ideal, right? It's not there, but also there's a hard power of, okay, this is what the federal government can do. This is what the provinces can do. There is that limit that's been adjudicated by the Supreme Court, among other things. But it's to say maybe what I was getting at, the whole truth and reconciliation, right? Let's have a greater respect for soft power. Let's ensure that we vote for people who have a respect for soft power, for culture, for cultural growth, for democratic norms and popular input, public debate, public discourse, and not, I can order these troops to fire on these Venezuelan fishermen, drug runner, whoever they are,
Mhm.
and I can send the army to kidnap Maduro, even if we all agreed Maduro wasn't the best man for the job, to put it mildly. You know, how you
Well, he had
achieve that.
conditions too, like he had sanctions on Venezuela and I mean, to be fair, I
Yeah,
think there were other things that were the government's fault itself. But
yeah,
there were sanctions and pressure. It's like Cuba, right? Like
yeah,
Cuba's been embargoed by America for 50 years, and it's kind of isolated because we don't like their government. So it's like they got to
yeah.
deal with conditions too. That's not just you know.
But are those making the conditions? But here's the thing, right? And this is maybe another
I've
question:
always heard
why?
sanctions actually don't work, and actually are the reasons why dictators actually stay in
Well, this
power.
was about to get at, right? Is, I mean, it's even the part of the the Treaty of Versailles and the rise of Hitler, right? Uh, the destabilization of German society. Why is Cuban? Why is Cuba saying the way it is? Because like you said, it's that. I mean, my whole theory with Netanyahu is he wants a strong Hamas because it fits his narrative that keeps him in power. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
so
I mean, what's funny?
yeah,
I remember a tweet back when I was on Twitter asking, like, "Where are the Mandelas of the Palestinians?"
yeah,
And somebody said, "They're all dead or arrested or dead because the Israeli government took them all, and now you're stuck with the Hamases of the world."
yeah,
So, congrats! Yeah, all the secular Palestinian leaders are dead. You shot them.
right. So, and that's the thing. And so, I mean, soft power. I mean,
All the
sanctions, blockades. Those are still kind of hard power. I mean, microcredit. I mean, diversifying economy. I mean, education. It's the longer game is the answer, and um, I mean, unfortunately, in Star Wars, I mean, unfortunately,
wow.
there wasn't time for the Republic to actually play the longer game for Mon Mothma to really establish the kind of society she was hoping for.
Hmm.
Hopefully, Ray can do that.
Oh well, I'll say this though, and this kind of gets
Mhm,
to our, and maybe we can
mhm.
kind of wrap it up. I'm sorry, I keep thinking of stuff. It's so good.
Yeah.
Maybe with Ahsoka at least, probably not Mando and Grogu, but definitely with Ahsoka.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
Mon's gonna have to make a decision. I hope
Hmm.
of okay, there's Grand Admiral Thrawn's back. He's got
Yeah.
an army of Night Sister zombies and Imperial remnants. I don't
Hmm.
think he's interested in negotiating peacefully with me and
No.
wants to see me dead.
Hmm.
What do I do? What do I do with Dathomir, right? And
Yeah.
most likely, if you believe the art and stuff, it's like, well, either she or the Republic's got to set a task force and kick his butt, and they might lose badly.
Hmm.
So there's a question there too. It's like again, the limits of New Republic
Yeah.
power, but sometimes a little hard power is important too.
I mean, that's the thing with Hera trying to make her case, right?
Mhm.
She's going to have a much stronger case. And this, I mean, I think with when Elliot was on, we were talking about how where Star Wars kind of gets into being doing its Star Wars thing, where it does its Star Wars thing is, oh, we got to have a Star War because there's this big evil force coming at us. We
Mhm.
got to actually put up our guns and have a big people's fleet going to Exegol, or in Hera's case, mobilizing a Republic fleet to fight back against Thrawn.
Mhm.
It's it's the Star War, but we can still ask, well, that's the story we're exploring, and the characters were exploring the situation of it.
Mhm.
Um, the question that George asks in the prequel trilogy is, what are the conditions that got us there in the first place? What are the choices? What is the kind of leadership failure that got us to this point where we need a rebellion in the first place? That's something even the High Republic is starting to
Mhm.
look at and veer towards, and the Acolyte as well.
Mhm.
Uh, and yeah, the wider view. I mean, that's why I'm a prequelist, guys. Turns out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so sorry. I know we gotta wrap this up, but I've
Yeah,
also kind of like in terms of personality and
it's
conditions.
interesting.
I'm gonna leave maybe one more prequelist question.
You sure?
Would someone like Valorum had been more
Mm,
successful in the conditions of the High Republic than the final years of the Galactic Republic? He seemed like a pretty middle of the road kind of guy. He doesn't seem that dynamic, but he also doesn't seem like a complete loser. Maybe he was. I don't know. But would he have functioned better in a republic that was just less corrupt and had more idealists in its Senate? And this is kind of like something I always think about too in terms of systems and whatnot. Is like, yeah, we have systems, and they are important, but who are the personalities in the systems, and how many true believers are there? If he lived in the time of more true believers, would he have functioned better as a chancellor? And then we can leave it off there.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been more supported.
Mhm.
I'll say that. He would have had, if there wasn't Palpatine working the long game to take him down. That being said, especially Lena Sohn, especially Keon Greylark, Orlin Molo is more of an opportunist a little bit. It kind of comes across that way, but Greylark and So, they're still strong leaders. It's that there's inspiring leaders who we get to see behind the curtain to the actual people they are, and kind of what they're willing to do and the kind of networks they're willing to do. So I don't know. Like, I don't know if he'd even become chancellor. I don't know if he'd have a chance. Right.
It'd be interesting to kind of like reverse those two. Like, what if Valorum was here and Lena Soh was like in the final years of the Galactic Republic when things are just so bleak? I wonder if she could turn the tide or not, or like Obama's situation where you think, oh, you might think it better, and like you actually don't.
Yeah, we were 8 years in power. I want to read that book by Ta-Nehisi Coates, actually. I mean, I think Lena Soh would have been like a Mon Mothma or Bail Organa, right? I can see that. If she's still the heroic character, I don't think she would have been able to be chancellor, because again, you need to be. So here's my point: is I think Valorum, him being elected was likely the result of corruption, the result of the decay. That he just probably like Biden, right? Being elected. Well, Biden was all right, but
it all fell apart too. So damn.
Yeah, like Biden was just there. He comes out in the middle, and Bernie Sanders hijacks Bernie Sanders' campaign. Valorum's kind of the result of it, whereas of course Palpatine is the source of the corruption.
Right.
Whereas, I think there isn't as much corruption in that time. It's the High Republic. It's a lot cleaner, a lot more respect for rule of law and for cooperation. I mean, we are all the Republic. And so, I don't think either would have had a chance. And that's kind of it's the before image, right? So,
right. Okay, I'm just curious about that. I would just like to be fun with it, but we've been going for 2 hours. I think that's a good sign to maybe wrap it up. Leadership, what makes it effective is good something. What do we measure it by? And again, what are the conditions of which a leader must lead? What the system they're leading, and their personalities, and kind of how that all blends together in a very complicated way.
Yep.
This was just the Mothma versus Palpatine discussion in a lot of ways.
You know what, though? I'm here for it.
Yeah, me too. In terms of how they ran their governments. So this was fun. I feel like we could probably come back to this a lot of time with other types of leaders. Yeah,
it's like we have poli-sci degrees and we want to use them. There we go.
Gotta do something.
Yeah. There we go. But it's a good place to wrap things up. Thanks for everyone for joining us. Sticking it out, sticking the long game. Let us know what you thought of the teaser trailer commercial thing. What you thought of what you think about good people supporting Trump and delusion and cognitive dissonance. Do you think Star Wars has gone anywhere, or has it always been around in books and comics, etc.? Is this the big return of Star Wars, or is it just more of a continuation of what's come before? Maybe that's way to articulate that. Please do let us know. The comment boxes down below ain't going anywhere. So do comment there below, and also on socials. We'll get to that in a second. Do give this video a like and a share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. So speaking of social media, Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID20234 on Blue Sky, JID20234 on Blue Sky. You can follow us at the Ion Cannon Pod, ioncannon.bluesky.social, and the Star Wars Underworld podcast, Blue Sky as well, where I posted an interesting data thing about the various trailers of Star Wars and how Mando and Grogu is weirdly right on schedule with most of Star Wars movie marketing of the successful ones, mind
There we
you,
go.
not Solo, but so it's following the successful model so far.
There you go. Following the playbook. Yeah, you can find my personal Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads, mainly Instagram at MNEUG1138. Still in the Bird app at Energy485, but Instagram is where I typically live. Also, of course, Ion Cannon and the Tractor Beam.bisky.social. Speaking of the Tractor Beam, we got the Jar Jar one shot coming up. I'm excited for that. It's gonna be a fun conversation. Probably not that long. It's one comic, but you never know. You never know. So check that out. That's 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here this coming Wednesday on Underworld Network, Underworld YouTube channel, wherever we are, and also on Spotify and Apple, the Tractor Beam Star Wars comics reviews. Do check that out, and then of course coming back at you next week. We're doing something kind of different. Probably not going to be as political, as heady. The most memorable novel openers, and I'll explain where I come from that. I'm reading Acolyte Wayseeker, and has a very fascinating first chapter. And so, what novels that stick out as their first chapters that stick out in our brains, and probably for good quality, for good reason as well. So do check that out right here next Monday, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and yeah, to get all up to speed on everything Ion Cannon. Joel, until then, let's blow this thing and head home.